Well, today's guest is a person near and dear to my integrative heart. Listen to this episode to the end if you're interested in finding out about CGMs. Everybody's wearing something. Everybody's wearing an Oura ring or a CGM. What are CGMs? What is the importance of our blood sugar, the spikes, and the insulin, the control, relation to stress? What could we do about this data that we get? Listen to the end to find out about the supplements, top 3 supplements that she uses to help control blood sugar. Well, hello friends, and welcome to another episode of Intentional Living with Emla podcast. Today I have my friend who I love to introduce as a woman after my own integrative heart. The reason I say that is because Dr. Lara Zakaria is not only a pharmacist, she has a PharmD just like me, but she's got a master's in nutrition and a master's in public health. So this woman is a nutritionist, she's a pharmacist, she's a professor, she's a public health expert, and she uses all these degrees. And so today, I summoned her. By the way, if you have not listened to the episode I had with her earlier about protein, do yourself a favor. Stop this episode right now. Go back and listen to that. We're going to put that in the show notes so you can go and listen to her do her spill on protein, during which she attacked me and the rest of the world on protein. And I'm just going to say this before. So the girls listened at the pharmacy and they said they've had more pressure to incorporate protein and fiber into their life from Dr. Lara than they had pressure to do drugs. I love this.
Guilty. And you know what? I'm okay with that accusation.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for putting us pressure to incorporate protein and fiber, not just the protein and fiber. Eating the rainbow. That's positive pressure.
Thank you for
coming on today.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm happy to hear that the message is resonating.
The message is resonating. And again, we're here today with another hot topic. When I say wearables, now we have all the data. We live in a period where, as humans, we are exposed to more data than we have ever been exposed to. We have all the data. Now, does that data truly drive behavior change, or does that data just accumulate and stress us? What do we do with all the data we collect? So today, I invited Dr. Lara to talk with us about wearables. So what exactly qualifies as a wearable if you're new to this world? What is a wearable?
Great question. So wearable would be technically any device that you would wear on your body that is meant to it's meant to pull some sort of data about your health. So we call that biometric data. So my Oura ring, your Apple Watch, a Whoop, a Fitbit, all of those technically are wearables. And we're seeing more and more different types of wearables enter into the market. One that we're going to talk a lot about today are CGMs, or continuous glucose monitors, which are essentially, I have a demonstration, which are essentially a little disc. You can see has a little bit of it's a filament, not quite a needle. It's actually very, very small and very, very flexible. And that inserts usually into the back of the arm, on the abdomen. You can put it on the thigh. And its job is to continuously monitor your glucose, as the name implies. So technically, this is a wearable device. It's not technically new, but it's new to the consumer market, meaning that for the first time ever, it's available over the counter. In the last 2 years, it became available over the counter for anybody to be able to use it. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the implications are, why anybody would want to use it, even if they're not diabetic. But there's a ton of other devices that I think are adjacent to wearables. And they're not quite technically wearables by definition. For example, at-home blood pressure monitor, there are devices that are EKG devices that look like usually a a flat disc that you put your thumbs on, and it monitors your heart rhythms. It's really useful for people that might have AFib or have some sort of arrhythmia. There are also devices like body composition scales that help to not just measure your weight in pounds or kilos, but also breaks down your weight in terms of how much of it is coming from muscle mass, from body fat, or from visceral fat, which is really helpful to better identify your metabolic health. So there's a ton of different ways for us to get this biometric data. I tend to kind of talk more broadly about all the at-home consumer devices when I talk about wearables, but just so everybody knows, technically it's the ones that you wear on your body that count.
All right, so the ones that we wear on our body that is able to pull some biometric data from us, and then that way we're able to see that. So specifically, I'm really interested in getting information to our audience today about the CGM. So she said CGM, that is continuous glucose monitor. So initially, continuous glucose monitors were meant for diabetics, people who had a diagnosis of diabetes, type 1 or type 2. So, but now we're beginning to see people who do not have diabetes wear CGMs and get some data out of it. Tell us about that shift.
Yeah, so I think something that some people don't understand is that these devices have been on the market for decades. They're not a new technology. They have been improving periodically over the years and becoming smarter and smarter. And in the case of diabetics, particularly diabetics who are using insulin, they could be a game changer for us to manage their insulin better and to prevent them from going into ketoacidosis, which is when their blood sugar drops too low, or from having really high highs. And then we could better target their insulin doses. So they have been really, really useful in that field. And over time, they've improved the technology to the point where it's literally every minute, sometimes even faster, pulling data into their app. And then some people that have insulin pumps, it allows their insulin pump then to sync with that data and then to automatically deliver and dispense insulin to them. So what an amazing technology, and so useful in particular for those diabetic patients. That said, there is, in the last, I would say 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, an interest in using that data in people who don't have diabetes, who aren't on insulin, who maybe have prediabetes or are concerned about insulin resistance, or maybe have some other metabolic issue, and they want to understand how their body responds to sugar and what their body is doing with those carbohydrates, how quickly it's using the sugar, how high it goes, how low it goes after they eat. Or what I find the most interesting is how it responds to things like stress, sleep, if your blood sugar is stable overnight, and using that data to then optimize their diet, the timing of their meals, the timing of their workouts, how they sleep, when they exercise, all of those things. Because when you have better data, the studies do show that we tend to have better behavior change. Like the habit sticks when you could see the effect right away. You don't have to wait 3 months, 6 months, a year to see your lab results at your doctor's office. You're more likely to be consistent with those habit changes. And in my practice, I've noticed that it does make a difference. It is effective for helping people really understand not only how their body's being affected by their choices, but also how their body shifts in response to the better habits.
That makes so much sense because, from a layman perspective, we just think about it when we think of continuous glucose monitoring. We're thinking of just the food. But I like what you said there. We're getting so much data. We're able to see sleep. We're able to see stress. We're able to see other things, not just how our body is reacting to what we're putting on our plate. And very interesting because I've always been concerned that this data that we have from wearables, a lot of people looking at their sleep patterns, their stress patterns, insulin spikes, and all this, and they're worried about it. And that's increasing stress, that's increasing cortisol, and we're not doing ourselves a favor by just having data which is overwhelming and not positive actions and intentional actions to be able to align, like what happens when my glucose is this, what happens when my insulin is this, what happens when my A1C is this. And you brought a good point about measuring that A1C in 3 months or having data right now. So you said research shows that if we have our data available to us, we are able to make better behavioral changes.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. What it is that the data itself, without any actionable or empowering steps, is overwhelming and not
Yeah.
useful. The most accurate data in the world, if you can't do anything with it, is not useful data.
Yeah.
And then if you're overwhelmed and bombarded, you're checking your Oura ring every 5 minutes, you're checking your CGM now you're looking at XYZ markers, you're getting on your body composition scale. You have all this data, but if you don't know how to make it better, then when it tells you it's not good, that is going to be a negative stressor. That's not helpful either. And I would argue in those cases, it's negatively going to impact behavior change because you're going to throw your hands up in the air. You go, well, I don't know how to fix this. So screw it. I'm not going to make any changes. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, or I'm going to double down on the bad habit, right? So it's really important that we couple the data with actionable, useful, healthy behaviors. And this is where I think working with clinicians who know how to use the data and can help guide you and coach you through how to manage it is really important. And I think in the broader sphere, there's a conversation about, we're focusing on CGMs, on whether or not these should have been made for consumer, or they should have remained as prescription only. And there's a lot of people that make really good points. We don't have a ton of guidance and research about how to use them in a healthy population, people who don't have diabetes yet. We basically, as clinicians, we're using what we understand about the physiology, and we're using what we understand about blood sugar control and insulin resistance to do our best to interpret that data. So I don't expect the average consumer who maybe doesn't have that training to be able to automatically slap a Stelo or a Lingo on and know what to do with that information. And the companies themselves are not they're not their role isn't necessarily to teach patients what to do with that. So you're seeing some other companies come into the space trying to create technology, leverage AI, use their apps to help guide some of those. A good example of that is if you have an Oura ring, you might know that there's a partnership between Stelo, which is the over-the-counter CGM made by Dexcom, with Oura. So on my ring, I'm wearing a Stelo right now. And so on my Oura app, I can see my blood sugar, and it gives me some feedback in terms of how I'm doing. So it gives me some information. It gives me my time in range, my percentage of time in range, how often I'm within the ideal ranges, how often I go over. It'll predict for me if I log my food into the app, it'll predict for me what I should see in terms of blood sugar. And if that's correct or not, or if that's accurate or not, they'll guide me and say, well, if you do this, then this might impact those changes. But without that, if I just look at my Stelo app by itself, it doesn't really give me any of that feedback. It tells me my time in range, it tells me what my data is, but it doesn't necessarily guide the behavior change. And it doesn't tell me how my habits when I exercise and it says, hey, you exercised, or you ate this meal, or you slept less than 7 hours last night, or hey, you're stressed out in this moment. It doesn't help me interpret that, and it doesn't help me make those connections. And I would say Aura does a little bit of a better job in that space, but no one's going to do as good of a job as your clinician who knows you, knows your body, and can help you focus in on what you need to know and what you need to pay attention to.
I love that. I love that. So when I think of somebody, so I think of diabetics. We'll keep diabetics out of the question. So because for now, let's say diabetics, we have guidelines on what to do, and that's in relation to their insulin, and we know how to use that data for them. For somebody who is not a diagnosed diabetic, and they're interested in what a Stelo or a Lingo can do for them, what are the first steps? What do you advise people? What should they step into, or what do they need to do before getting one of these?
Yeah, I think the first thing that before you even get one of these, I think it's really understand to be clear on what your goals are, right?
Yes.
Are you looking to prevent diabetes? Are you looking to
Yes.
optimize your workouts? Are you worried about your sleep quality? And so you want to understand if your blood sugar is playing a role in that.
Yes.
Are you just curious, right? Like, so what is the goal of using one of these things? And I usually recommend if you're gonna use the your first, so each of these discs will last you 2 weeks. So they're done, they work for 2 weeks, and then you're supposed to replace it if you're going to continue. And I usually say in those 2 weeks, those first 2 weeks that you put one on, you
Mm-hmm.
want to just pay attention. So keep your goal in mind, right? And then pay attention. Notice what happens after you eat a certain meal. Notice what happens if you experiment and change the meal. Notice what happens if you take a walk after dinner. What's it doing overnight while you're sleeping, and how was your sleep? Wake up, you feel good. What did your blood sugar look like? You wake up, you don't feel so hot. What did your blood sugar look like? And there may or may not be correlations, right? There may not be connections between those things, but the more you pay attention, the more you make sense of the data. And number two, this is, I think, what the game changer is. You start to pay attention to your body more. So now all of a sudden, in a world where I'm distracted by scrolling social media, by the news, by whatever's happening in at work, whatever drama's happening at home with the family, we're so disconnected from being in our body that this all of a sudden gives you something very specific. It's almost meditative to pay attention to so that you can see if you're noticing anything, right? And I think that's really powerful. It's almost like honing in on something and asking you to pay attention and reminding you to pay attention. And if you just do that, and at the end of those 2 weeks, you have felt more embodied in your body than you have before, then it's done a great job. Even if everything looks normal, there's nothing notable about your blood sugar and nothing really like to write home about, right? Fantastic high five on having good blood sugar control, but more importantly, congratulations on just taking 2 weeks to just pay attention and come back inward into your body.
I love that, and I'm thinking to myself, if you if you get that data and you say to yourself, but before let's go before getting the data, like you said, when you said if somebody who is like thinking of getting better control and just thinking about preventing diabetes, we do testing at the pharmacy. I'll put a link to our Journeys testing where we test your A1C, your fasting glucose, your insulin, fasting insulin, and all these data, and your inflammation levels. And these are all the data that we put together. I'll put a link to the Journeys there. You don't want to go into on this journey without knowing your biomarkers. So those biomarkers are important. And like Dr. Lara said, work with somebody who knows how to interpret the data, from data to actionable items that we get like an intentional result towards the life that you dream of living, the whole person health that you dream of living. So you need to work with somebody with that. But before we get to that point, I want to think of so in our food world, we have villainized some foods, and we have, said, oh, this food will spike your blood sugar, and this food would, it's good for your blood sugar. This one, dulls that spike. What are some surprising things you have found as you wear your CGM? So, and as you see your patients, that they've wanted, tell us some of those surprising things that you have found with the CGM.
Yeah, I want to use this opportunity to liberate the poor potato and white rice because they have gotten and oatmeal while we're at it. They
You
have
have been
gotten
granted the opportunity to liberate the potato, the white
liberate
rice,
potato.
and oatmeal.
Yes. Because listen, years ago, we looked at what was called the glycemic index, and we noticed that white rice versus brown rice had a higher glycemic index,
Yes.
white potatoes versus sweet potatoes, oatmeal, specifically like steel cut versus rolled oats versus instant. And we said, you know what? Never have white rice again, never have a white potato again, never eat, instant oatmeal. Look, I might even make an excuse for the instant oatmeal thing. It's convenient, but to me, rolled oats or steel cut oats, I like the texture better. So I can let that one slide.
Okay.
But the poor white potato that is high in vitamin C, it's one of the best sources of resistant starch. Same with white rice, one of the best sources of resistant starch, which is a rare starch to be able to get from our diet to begin with. Especially when you heat it, cool it, and then eat it either cold or reheat it again, the resistant starch just shoots up. And that resistant starch is one of the most powerful ways to heal your gut and to make sure that your body is making short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids like butyrate have systemic value. They not only help to heal the gut, support the microbiome, help rebalance the microbiome, but they also help calm inflammation, and they have just systemic impacts. Like lower amounts of short chain fatty acids are associated with chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, dementia, etc. So not only are we missing out on that resistant starch, but we're missing out on a food staple that I'm going to say this is a controversial opinion, but white rice tastes better than brown rice. It just does. It just does.
I
Okay.
don't think it's controversial. You have a
You
lot of
might
people who will support you on that.
listen, and you might love brown rice. I had a lot of people tell me they do genuinely love brown rice. That's great for you. However, now I have people who are skipping out on rice altogether because they don't like brown rice and they've been told that white rice is bad for them. Even worse, rice in general is a staple across the planet for food. So you're going to tell me Asian cultures that rely on rice are unhealthy when we know some East Asian countries are some of the longest living people in the world, some of the healthiest populations in the world? That doesn't quite make sense to me. So when you put all that together and you just think about this, okay, is there a way for us to really understand how these foods are working in our body, right? And is there a way for me to enjoy these foods that's going to be healthy ultimately, that I can get all the benefits of that resistant starch without having some of the negative impacts, right? We can do that with a CGM. Right? So here's what I did. This is an N of one. This is anecdotal. This is not a study. But I slapped a CGM on and I ate different kinds of rice, and I timed the rice in different ways where I would eat the rice first, eat the rice after I had some protein, have some vegetables with it. Sometimes I'll mix the rice with cauliflower rice so that there's like the rice itself has more fiber in it. And I've noticed that there's not a significant difference in the way that my blood sugar responds when I have white rice versus brown rice. Same with potatoes. My blood sugar does the same thing with a yam or a sweet potato as it does with a potato. That's for me in my body. I've also noticed that depending on your body, you might have a different glycemic response to something. In other words, because of the microbiome, because of your digestive system, because of your way, your unique physiology, your body might have a very different response, and you might slap on a CGM, eat some white rice, and it skyrockets, and you may not have the same experience that I had. So this not only tells me that it's not necessarily true that these foods are bad because they spike our blood sugar. There's more context that we have to take into consideration. Also, there's about 1 gram of fiber difference between brown rice and white rice. So it's not about the content of the fiber, right? There's more resistant starch in white rice, and same with potato. And oats have something called beta glucan, which is another real unique, hard to find fiber. So we've been operating from a place where we're telling everybody, as if everybody is exactly the same, that no one should be eating these foods because they're bad for your blood sugar. But what if we can actually experiment with these foods, add different combinations, add fruits and vegetables and other sources of fiber and protein, and change the way somebody responds to that food, and now they can enjoy that food and get all the benefits of that food at the same time.
This podcast is sponsored by Journeys, your path to intentional wellness. Most health problems don't start overnight, and neither does wellness. With Journeys, you can take charge of your health before you have to. Every cell in your body is speaking to you. But when we ignore preventive medicine, we wait until those cells are screaming. Journeys helps you listen to the whispers. There are 3 different journeys to choose from, each designed to meet you where you are in your wellness path. The Core Wellness Journey for $199 offers a foundational look at your overall health, perfect for getting started and measuring 66 biomarkers. The Advanced Heart and Metabolic Health Journey for $339 measures 111 biomarkers and goes deeper into cardiovascular, metabolic, and thyroid health for a more detailed picture. The comprehensive longevity and hormone journey costs $469 and is the most complete view, including hormone, nutrient markers that support energy, balance, and healthy aging. This measures 120 biomarkers. Each journey includes a personalized recommendation, one-on-one care from your pharmacist, and follow-up support to help you turn results into lasting intentional change. You just won't get data. You'll get guidance, accountability, and a partner in your wellness journey. Intentional living means paying attention, staying curious, and taking steps towards the health you deserve. Start your journeys today. Click the link in the show notes. Interesting. Really interesting. I feel like white rice just got liberated and potatoes. I just feel like they just got liberated. So the people campaigning for white rice. So, but you mentioned something which I want to bring your attention back to. Tell me again about increasing the amount of resistant starch in white rice. So how do I do
Yeah.
this at home? How
I
do I
call this
try
the
this at
double
home?
cook. I call this the double cook method.
The
Okay.
double cook
So
method.
the
Explain.
double cook method. So you cook it once, right? So you make your rice the way you normally make your rice. By the way, there's ways for us to actually optimize the way that we make the rice, improve its digestibility. Adding a little bit of a vinegar or a lemon helps to do that. Soaking it beforehand helps to do that. Paraboiling it or boiling it with extra water allows us to also allow some of the heavy metals like arsenic that are found in the rice to also be washed out of the rice. So that helps improve the health of the rice. And this is true for both brown and white rice or wild rice for that matter. But in terms of the resistant starch, once you cook it, you've got this beautiful rice and you want to stick it in the fridge. Let it cool down. It doesn't have to be overnight. It could just be for an hour or so and then reheat it. And that increases the amount of resistant starch. Technically, the resistant starch increases as it cools. So if you like cold rice, I guess you can eat it cold. You don't have to reheat it. But if you prefer to warm it up, you can warm it up again. Same for potatoes. Cook them once. So batch cook potatoes, stick them in the fridge, warm them up every time that you want to have some. And you are taking in potatoes with an increased amount of resistant starch because of that cooling method.
Does this also work for sweet potatoes?
Interestingly, not as well. Sweet potatoes don't have as much resistant starch in them, but it does work with plantains for the record. And what you'll notice what's similar about those foods, plantains, white potatoes, and white rice, they're starchy, right?
Very. Yes.
Resistant starch is a starch, right? So it actually requires that it have that carbohydrate in it, that specific kind of carbohydrate, which makes it a little bit sweeter, which is usually why we villainize those foods and say that they're bad for us because of their impact on our blood sugar. But again, when we eat them in a certain order, when we're conscientious of the quantity that we're having or the serving size that we're having. When we pair it with protein, this is why I'm so obsessed with protein. When we pair it with protein, when we add other fibers from other foods, that really helps impact and blunt the way it impacts our blood sugar. So when you can experiment with a CGM, you can watch what your blood sugar response is and you can experiment. If it works for you, now you know that, hey, if I eat the protein first, I eat maybe a salad or soup before I have the rice or before I have the potatoes, that seems to make a difference. If I have a potato versus 7 potatoes, that's going to make a difference. A half a cup of rice versus 2 cups of rice, that's going to make a difference. So then you can learn what your body is actually responding to and still enjoy the food while you maximize the results.
That is so cool. I have learned something today that I didn't know before. I'm so impressed about this double cooking method for white rice to improve the resistant starch in them. So now we can get more resistant starch. Yes.
And
And
that
why
means
is this
like
resistant starch?
leftovers.
Why is the resistant starch important?
Resistant starch is important because, again, it's a unique starch. There's only a handful of foods that are a great source of resistant starch. Otherwise, we start to need to supplement it, which isn't bad, but I'd always rather get it from food. But resistant starch itself feeds certain parts of the microbiome. It's been shown to help support the balance and the diversity of the microbiome in a unique way. So, yes, all fibers are great, and what we want is diversity of fiber, but resistant starch has a special significance when it comes to ensuring that we're producing the kinds of microbes that really promote the production of those short chain fatty acids. So that in itself has been shown to be really effective and helpful. So it's kind of a long-term strategy. You're eating a food that might have a impact on your blood sugar right now, right?
Yes.
But it's feeding your microbiome and supporting these short chain fatty acids that in the long term protects you from developing diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
It's a
So
win-win.
it's not about the immediate impact necessarily as much as it is on the almost long-term investment in the protection that the microbiome can give you.
I love that. I love that. So that makes total sense. It all comes together now. So
Yeah.
there are two over-the-counter CGMs in the market. Am I right about that? I know of two. Are there more?
Correct, correct. I believe there's one more. I think Medtronic might have a competitor that is over the counter. So there's two major companies on the market that are really popular, really accessible, and the price points have been
Yes.
really accessible. And that's the Dexcom, which makes the Stello, and the Libre that makes the
Lingo.
Lingo. Yeah, and so those are the two available options. They retail at about $40 to $50 per 2 week disc, and they have the option to do subscriptions. And with a subscription, they often will give you a discount. They're available through their website, through Amazon, so they're very easy to get. And I know some pharmacies are starting to retail them as well.
Yeah, I've seen those. But the question is, do you have a preference among the two?
I
Is
do
there
have
one
a
that you
preference.
prefer?
I
Tell me
do have
why.
a preference. So let me say that both are fairly reliable devices. The what they do is both companies have taken some of the prescription versions, some of their older technology, and they've used the older technology to make the over the counters.
I
So
see.
they're not as accurate as their prescription version, and they don't import data as quickly. So I believe it's every 5 minutes, for example, on the Stello, where they're most the G7, which is their most recent update for their prescription version, I think does it every minute. So there's a slight difference. If you put two on at the same time, there's a slight difference in the data that it gives you. That said, they're still pretty reliable if I'm not worried about timing your insulin dose or about you going into ketoacidosis. So most healthy individuals, I'm not worried about that slight differentiation
Yes.
in the accuracy or the timing. So both are pretty good. The Lingo, the Stelo, both work well for that purpose. Both have an app that you would download to monitor and activate the device.
Yes.
And Lingo was only available on Apple for a long time, but now is available on both Apple and Android. So both are now available on either platform. So no matter what phone you have, you can use both. The major difference between the two is if you're working with a clinician, me, myself as a clinician, I'm biased. So if I'm going to recommend a device, I want to make sure I can see the data. And
Yes.
if you have a Lingo, I can't see your data. But if you have a Stello, I can log into my professional portal. You can link your
See.
device to my portal and I can monitor your data from there.
I
And so
see
I
why you
prefer
prefer
that.
that.
And I
I
will
see.
give it one more plus. The integration with Aura, I think, is also a great plus. So if you have a Stello that integrates with Aura, but the Lingo at this point doesn't integrate with any other wearable devices, that might change soon. But right now, the only way for you to see the impact of your stress or to watch your data in real time through your Aura app is to have the Stello. So as of this point, Stello is winning in my book.
I love that. It's nice that you explain those differences so that people can use that to make adequate, appropriate decisions for themselves. Because, like you explained, these are different. I could be wearing that, and my spikes will be different for different foods that I eat. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you'll see the
yeah.
same. And I think this brings up a really important point I want to make sure that we iron out. I think when people wear a CGM, there's this idea that you're supposed to make sure that your blood sugar stays stable, that it's a flat line. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually a problem if you have a flat line. That's actually something we need to investigate further and understand why your blood sugar is not fluctuating at all. Because your blood sugar should go up anytime there is glucose,
Yes.
protein, technically any meal, stress in response to cortisol or stress hormones, in response to exercise, all of those things should spike your blood sugar. The question becomes, how high does it spike? How long does it stay elevated? And how fast does it fall? So I tell my patients it's not about having a flat line. We're not driving through Texas here. What we want is what I call a boring roller coaster. I want your blood sugar to go up gradually in response to those triggers, and then I want it to come down very gradually. We don't want it to be a really fun roller coaster where it goes up and down very quickly. Right? And we don't want
I
it to be
love
one of those
that.
roller coasters where it stays high for a really long time and then all of a sudden drops. We want it to be this boring, gradual up, gradual down, kind of like the baby roller coasters that they have at a fair versus Great Adventure, right? So that's, I think, a really important thing to pay attention to. That's why, for me, the slight nuances, the differences, a few points here and there between the Stello, the Lingo, a G7, a Freestyle Libre, doesn't make a big difference to me because I'm not necessarily looking at a specific
Mm-hmm.
point and what your specific number is. I'm looking at the data that the lines that the data draws. So I'm zooming out and I'm looking at your response and not necessarily at a specific number. Now, of course, when it starts to go really high, you eat something, your blood sugar goes up to 180 or 200. That's of course going to be a red flag. We're going to want to dig into deeper to see why it's doing that. But I'm not necessarily as concerned that it's 180 as much as I'm concerned as what was it adjusted by your trigger? Did it go up
Shut up.
because you ate a normal dinner or is it because you had three donuts, right? It's normal if it goes up to 180 if you had three donuts.
Yes, yes,
But then how does your
yes,
body handle that after,
yes.
right? How does walking off those donuts after you ate them, how does that change things, right? How waking up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., how is your blood sugar responding? And is that triggering cortisol? Is that why you're waking up, right? Those are the data points I'm looking for. I'm looking for patterns. And so that's what I want people to look at versus an absolute number.
That is so interesting. That makes total sense. Well, Dr. Lara, I want to ask you a question that, people often leave behind. When we talk about blood sugar, we're always talking about the impact of food on blood sugar. There is something else that impacts blood sugar significantly, which we don't talk about, and this is stress. Does stress show up on the CGM? And just not just that, but why should we pay close attention to our stress levels with respect to blood sugar levels?
I'll tell you a little story. A few months ago, I was wearing my CGM. I had my Aura ring on, and I was doing a webinar. And in the middle of the webinar, something cut out. I don't know if it was the meeting, my Wi-Fi, something cut out, and I was like out of the meeting, and I'm like stressing out because this was an important client meeting, and I wanted to make sure I did a good job for this webinar. And there was like something like 65 people in the room, and I was like stressed. And when I tell you I was stressed, I was like sweat beading on my forehead. And I was able to get it back online, took a couple minutes. We found a workaround. I ended up calling into the meeting. I'm like talking into my phone while they're looking at my slide. It was a mess. We got through it. Everybody loved it. Great. Luckily, it only happened at the last 15 minutes of the presentation. But when I finished the meeting, I looked at my Aura ring, and Aura will track your stress during the day. And it was like spiked and it like stayed up for a little while during that whole time that I was stressing out. And what was interesting is I can see my blood sugar at the same time spike up in response. Now, this makes perfect sense because your fight or flight response, your stress response, does not know the difference between technology going out on a meeting or I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. It's like the same thing. Same thing. So what do I need to do if I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger? I need to liberate glucose and I need to bring the glucose into my muscles so that I can run away as fast as I can, right? Run, run, run. In order to do that, I need two hormones. I need cortisol, which liberates more insulin, and then insulin, which brings the glucose into the muscle and into the brain. And then I need these other stress hormones like epinephrine, norepinephrine, sometimes they're called adrenaline and noradrenaline, to really activate and make sure I'm alert. I'm really listening intently. Where is the saber-toothed tiger coming from? I'm not going to trip over a branch because I'm really intently paying attention on my environment, right? So when these stress hormones go up and when blood sugar goes up, this is a protective response. And this is normal physiology. This means you're healthy. Congratulations. You are capable of running away from a saber-toothed tiger. The problem is, in our current society, we run on stress. We run on adrenaline. We run on cortisol. And most of us are experiencing chronic stress. And so we're constantly producing these stress hormones to everything all the time. And that means that our blood sugar is being impacted by those stress hormones all the time as well, right? And my favorite thing that my dear patients usually tell me is my stress is okay. How do you handle stress? I handle it great. I'm one of those people. I thrive on stress. When I have a deadline, I do my best work. Honestly, I'm not even motivated until I'm a little stressed out over it. If that sounds like you, which is a lot of us, frankly, that used to be me myself, that means that you are pushing your body to the point where you're releasing these hormones in order to feel motivated, in order to feel productive. That's probably because you're a little burned out. So there's a really significant, probably chronic stress piece that's happening. And when I pair that and you can see your stress from your aura ring and you can see your blood sugar, all of a sudden the connection, that's why my blood sugar's all over the place. That's why my A1C is starting to go up. That's why my doctor said my LDL and my triglycerides are going up, right? You
Full
start to make
circle.
those connections. And I
Full
think that's
circle.
really, really useful because what used to be this kind of esoteric kind of concept
Yes.
that, yeah, stress and blood sugar are related now becomes a concrete, real life experience.
We need to fix that. We need to fix that. And the way we one step towards fixing that, I'm all about the solutions here, is towards what supplements can we use to help regulate our blood sugars. And this brings us to Supplements Go with Emla. And I'm so happy to have you on today because I want to talk about what supplements, real quick before we round up, what supplements we could use to control our blood sugar. What are the top two or the top three that are on your mind today? Let's talk about and tell us about them
Yeah.
in any
Obviously,
order.
this sits on top of a foundation of diet, stress management. Now we understand the impact of
Yes.
stress. We're going to talk a little bit more about the HRV, the wearables, the heart rate, the sleep quality piece next time.
Whole different
And how
podcast episode. Yes,
Yep, exactly.
please.
So
Yes.
stay tuned for part four where we
Yes.
really bring it all together. So it sits on top of that, foundational prescription. But I'm going to name top three. There's so many options in the toolkit, but I'm going to say my top three go-to based on what we
Yes.
know in the literature right now. So number one is fiber. Right. So if you are ideally getting enough fiber in your diet, but you want a little bit more help, fiber supplementation can be really helpful to help blood sugar. The most researched fiber type is psyllium husk. That is the most been shown to be the most effective for blunting what's called postprandial blood sugar spikes, or the spike that happens after a meal. So that's the most effective fiber. But I find any fiber that helps to support the microbiome, and most importantly, that helps slow down the impact of glucose can be really, really helpful. So fiber in general, psyllium husk specifically as a tool to reduce postprandial spikes. That's number one.
Right. Number one. Number two.
Number
Yes.
two is berberine. Berberine, you probably heard about, like I keep seeing it on social media, Nature's Ozempic. It's not necessarily Nature's Ozempic. However, there is some really interesting research that shows that the bitter compounds that are present in berberine, the active compounds, can help to stimulate the production of GLP-1, which can help with satiety and have some of similar impacts that those GLP medications like Ozempic have. But it's not exactly the same. It's actually slightly better in some ways. It's kind of like a combination of Ozempic and metformin, in that it also helps to work similarly to metformin, because actually, fun fact, metformin was derived from learning the mechanism of berberine, and helps to reduce or support the way the body uses glucose after it's already entered the system. So it works in two mechanisms. It's just not as, let's say, aggressive as those medications are. It's a little bit more gentle. It also has a bit of an antimicrobial or microbiome modulating effect, meaning that it can impact the balance of our microbiome as well. And so there's some interesting research about the way that it might actually help shift our microbiome in a way that helps us to further improve the way that we're metabolizing glucose, absorbing carbohydrates, and ultimately producing those short chain fatty acids at the same time. So it's got triple threat in a way, the way that it helps. There's also some research that's effective on the liver and on our cholesterol. And so it really has a broad range of implications when it's dosed properly and used properly. So that's number two. Number
Yes.
three
Three.
is a probiotic called Akkermansia mucin That's its full name. Sometimes we just call it Akkermansia.
Yes, yeah.
But the mucin is basically tells us that it is a mucus lover. So it loves to sit in the mucous membrane in the lining of our GI tract. And that mucous membrane is nice and cozy. And it's a place where the bacteria really thrives. It's where we make a lot of our neurotransmitters, our hormones like our serotonin is made there, our dopamine is made there, and components of our immune system are also made there. You may have heard that 80% of our immune system is actually made in the gut, thanks to this mucus lining when our gut is healthy and our microbiome is thriving. So Akkermansia has been shown when it is optimized to actually improve our blood sugar and reduces our risk for developing diabetes. There are some studies that show Akkermansia with a few other strains of friendly probiotics that work together that actually have been shown to lower A1C, improve weight loss, and act similarly to a GLP in terms of stimulating that GLP, our own natural GLP pathway. So I often use those three in combination with each other to help people not only get to the sort of that long-term strategy of improving their microbiome, but to target and improve their blood sugar immediately in their blood sugar response and ultimately their A1C, and to support their body recomposition if that's their goal.
So perfect. That is so. Remember, there is no exam here with supplements. Go with EMLA, but there are links in the show notes to get your fiber boost, EMLA Naturals fiber boost, and to also get your berberine. Always watch out. A lot of people are out there taking berberine. They don't know the therapeutic dose. You need to be taking at least a gram. So a lot of people taking just 250 or 500 milligrams, thinking that that's going to work. But we need to be able to work with a pharmacist, a functional pharmacist, integrated pharmacist, making sure that that you're getting the right dose to be able to help you with what's needed. So thank you very much for spending time with us today, Dr. Lara. I really appreciate you, all the insight that you bring to the show. And it's just, I can't thank you enough. I learn when I sit with you, then I imagine my audience learning more when they sit with you. So thank you again.
It is my honor to be able to teach and to talk about this and to have a friend as smart as you that is just having a platform for this conversation and allowing me to talk to your audience is just such an honor. Thank you so much.
All around. Thank you.